The rain had been falling steadily since late afternoon, turning the store's parking lot into a patchwork of shimmering puddles and reflecting the glow of the overhead lights. Sarah had just finished a long shift on her feet, her shoulders aching and her mind already drifting toward the quiet comfort of home. As she stepped outside, she pulled her coat tighter around herself, bracing against the cool wind and the steady drizzle that soaked the ground. While walking toward the bus stop, her attention was drawn to an elderly man standing near the edge of the lot. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to manage several grocery bags at once. One bag tore open and a few items rolled dangerously close to a puddle. He sighed, clearly frustrated and exhausted, glancing around as if hoping someone might notice him. Most people hurried past, heads down, eager to escape the rain. Sarah slowed her pace. For a brief moment, she considered how tired she was and how late it was getting, but something about the man's expression, part embarrassment, part quiet resignation, made her stop. She turned back and approached him with a gentle smile. "Let me help you with that," she said, reaching down to pick up the fallen items before they were ruined by the rain. The man looked up, surprised and then visibly relieved. "That's very kind of you," he replied, his voice soft but sincere. Together they gathered the groceries and carefully carried them toward his car, parked a short distance away. The rain soaked through Sarah's sleeves, but she didn't mind. She chatted lightly as they walked, asking if he lived nearby and whether the weather always gave him trouble. He laughed quietly and admitted that it did, especially on days when he underestimated how much he could carry. When they reached the car, Sarah helped place the bags securely inside, making sure nothing was crushed or left behind. The man paused, studying her face as if committing it to memory. "Thank you," he said again, this time with deeper emotion. Not many people would stop like that. Sarah shrugged modestly. "It's no trouble at all, I'm glad I could help." She waved goodbye and turned to leave, her shoes splashing lightly through the puddles. As she walked away, she felt a small sense of warmth that had nothing to do with the weather. To her, the moment was simple and unremarkable, just another small kindness in an ordinary day. She had no idea that this brief, rain-soaked encounter was the beginning of something far bigger than she could ever imagine. The next morning began in the most ordinary way possible. Sarah arrived at the office just before 9, balancing a cup of coffee in one hand and her worn leather bag over her shoulder. The rain from the night before had cleared, leaving the city washed clean and bright under the early sunlight. Inside the building, the familiar hum of printers, keyboards, and quiet conversations filled the air, instantly pulling her into her routine. She settled at her desk, powered on her computer, and reviewed the list of tasks she had carefully written the night before. Deadlines were approaching fast, and she knew the day would demand her full attention. As she organized her files, snippets of conversation drifted across the open office. Several coworkers whispered excitedly about an important announcement scheduled for later in the morning. "Did you hear?" someone murmured. "The new CEO is finally coming in today." "I heard he's very private," another replied. "No one's even seen a photo." Sarah barely looked up from her screen. Office rumors came and went, and in her experience, they rarely changed anything that mattered. Management shifts were discussed endlessly, but the work still had to be done and clients still expected results. She took a sip of her coffee and focused on finishing a report that had been keeping her up late for days. As the morning progressed, emails poured in, each demanding attention. Sarah moved efficiently, responding where needed and making careful notes for later follow-ups. She enjoyed the quiet satisfaction that came from staying organized and productive. While others occasionally paused to speculate about what the new leadership might mean, possible restructures, new policies, or unexpected promotions, Sarah kept her eyes on her monitor. Around mid-morning, her manager passed by her desk and reminded the team about a short meeting scheduled before lunch. The tension in the office seemed to rise and the chatter grew louder. Sarah nodded politely but returned to her work, determined to finish one more task before the meeting. To her, it was just another workday, no different from the many that had come before. She had responsibilities to meet and goals to achieve, and she believed that consistency and effort mattered more than titles or rumors. As she saved her final document and leaned back in her chair, she had no idea that this ordinary morning was quietly setting the stage for a moment that would soon change the course of her professional life forever.
Ladies and gentlemen, today marks a pivotal moment for our organization. We stand pressed to enter opportunities.
Just before lunchtime, the entire department was asked to gather in the main conference room. Chairs scraped softly against the floor as employees took their seats, their voices lowered to curious whispers. Sarah entered near the back, carrying her notebook and pen, expecting a routine announcement followed by instructions to return to work. The atmosphere, however, felt unusually charged, as if everyone sensed something important was about to happen. A few moments later, the door opened. Conversation stopped instantly. A tall, well-dressed man stepped into the room, flanked by two senior executives. His posture was calm and confident, and the quiet authority he carried filled the space without a single word being spoken. Sarah lifted her eyes and her breath caught in her throat. The face was unmistakable. It was the same elderly man from the grocery store parking lot, only now he looked entirely different. His hair was neatly styled, his suit perfectly tailored, and his expression composed and assured. For a brief second, Sarah wondered if exhaustion was playing tricks on her, but then their eyes met. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by a warm, familiar smile. In that instant, the memory of the rain, the torn grocery bag, and his quiet gratitude came rushing back. Sarah felt her cheeks flush as she realized what was happening. This was not just the new CEO, this was the stranger she had helped without a second thought. He stepped forward and began speaking, introducing himself in a measured, confident tone. He thanked the team for their hard work and spoke briefly about the company's vision and values. The room listened in complete silence. Sarah tried to focus, but her mind was racing, her heart pounding louder with every word. Then unexpectedly he paused. "Before we continue," he said, scanning the room, "I'd like to acknowledge something personal." His gaze settled on Sarah. The room followed his eyes, and suddenly all attention was on her. She sat frozen, unsure whether to stand or disappear into her chair. "Last night," he continued, "I was helped by someone in this very room. In the rain, when I was struggling with groceries, she stopped without hesitation and offered her help." A murmur spread through the room. "That simple act of kindness," he said, "reminded me of the values I want this company to represent." He nodded toward Sarah. "Thank you." The room filled with quiet applause. Sarah managed a small, stunned smile, her heart still racing. In that moment, she understood that what she had considered an ordinary, forgettable kindness had just been seen and remembered in a way she never could have imagined. Later that afternoon, just as the office began to settle back into its usual rhythm, Sarah received a message from her manager asking her to report to the CEO's office. Her heart skipped a beat. The applause from the meeting still echoed faintly in her mind, and uncertainty crept in as she stood from her desk. Straightening her jacket, she took a steady breath and walked down the quiet hallway, her footsteps sounding louder than usual against the polished floor. The CEO's office was spacious yet understated, designed with calm intention rather than excess. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, and shelves lined with neatly arranged books hinted at years of experience and careful thought. The man stood as she entered, greeting her with the same warm smile he had offered in the parking lot the night before. "Please have a seat," he said, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. Sarah sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, unsure of what to expect. She assumed this meeting was simply a formal thank you, perhaps a continuation of the public acknowledgement from earlier. Instead, he surprised her. "I didn't call you in to praise you," he began calmly. "You didn't help me last night for recognition. You did it because it was the right thing to do." He leaned forward slightly. "That tells me a great deal about your character." He explained that he had spent years building organizations, learning that skills could be taught, but integrity and empathy could not. He had reviewed her work record earlier that day, her consistency, reliability, and willingness to take responsibility without seeking attention. The kindness he experienced was not an exception, it was a reflection of who she was. "I believe people like you belong in positions where they can influence others," he said. Then he made an offer, an opportunity to step into a role with greater responsibility, mentorship, and room to grow. It was a position Sarah had never imagined herself being considered for, let alone offered so unexpectedly. For a moment she was speechless. "I don't expect an answer immediately," he added gently. "I want you to think about it." As Sarah left the office, her mind felt light and overwhelmed all at once. She returned to her desk with a new understanding. Success did not always begin with ambition or strategy. Sometimes it began with a simple act of kindness offered without expectation and returned in ways no one could ever plan.